Russia has overcome its dependence on Siemens and General Electric's high-capacity gas turbines, Rostec head Sergei Kimizov said, and Russia, unlike Iran, has done it thanks to its own brains and technologies. The first serial turbine will be installed at a power plant on the Taman Peninsula. How did Russia become so critically dependent on Western turbines in the first place? Russia has overcome its dependence on foreign-made supplies of high-capacity gas turbines, said Sergei Kimizov, head of Rostec State Corporation, at a meeting with Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin. To quote, "We are installing a large-capacity GTD 110M turbine at the Udarnaya station, which is being built on the Taman Peninsula. This is the first serial turbine. We are confident that we can be independent from Siemens and General Electric. We have built 3 stations. This is the third. 2 stations were built in Crimea and 1 on the Taman Peninsula, Udarnaya, which will be fully launched this year," Kimizov noted. GTD 110M is a serial gas turbine engine of high capacity. Such turbines are used at modern CHPPs and gas-fired power plants. The developers are in Turau, Rusnano, Gas Turbine Technology Center, and ODK Saturn, a subsidiary of Rostec. It is manufactured at ODK Saturn in Rybinsk, Yaroslavl region. Serial production from 2024, 2 units per year. Own high-capacity gas turbines are the Achilles heel of the Russian power industry. Russia has been fighting over localization of turbine production technology for more than 10 years, and in addition to Rostec, there is a project of power machines for 65 megawatts and 170 megawatts. This will allow replacing the failing units from Siemens and General Electric, which are on the new gas stations. The gas turbine is the size of a small house and could supply the energy needs of an entire, albeit small, city. For a long time, it seemed that there was simply no alternative to companies like Siemens. However, last year the combined net losses of the big 4 gas turbine manufacturers amounted to almost 5 billion euros. Therefore, Rostec's launch of the first Russian serial turbine is an extremely important event. After all, we can talk not only about replacing Western products, but even about potential competition. This is an achievement of a qualitatively different order. The key point here is that large-capacity turbines have started to be mass-produced. Russia has never produced such powerful gas turbines on its own. We knew how to make small and medium-sized gas turbines, but not with a capacity of 100 megawatts or more. Therefore, when in the 2000s we started to actively build power plants, we started to buy turbines from Western companies, Siemens and General Electric. Therefore, joint ventures with these companies were established. However, it is difficult to talk about deep localization of production. At the same time, foreign companies earn money in Russia not only by selling their turbines, but also by servicing and repairing them. Higher School of Economics experts earlier calculated that Russia's dependence on imported gas turbines in 2022 amounted to more than 90%, which is a critical dependence. But after 2022, their main suppliers, Siemens and General Electric, stopped working with Russia and withdrew from joint ventures. Therefore, the task of import substitution of high-capacity gas turbines has become even more urgent. As a temporary solution, Western turbines were replaced with smaller capacity turbines at a number of facilities. How did it happen that Russia became so dependent on Western high-capacity gas turbines? Some of the technology was lost with the collapse of the Soviet Union. The fact is that during the Soviet era, the production of high-capacity gas turbines, including those for naval ships, was located in Ukraine, and the RSFSR had the production of aircraft engines. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, these competencies remained in Ukraine. At first, the neighbors supplied gas turbine engines for Russian Navy ships, but gradually economic ties were broken. Mykolaiv plant, Zaryamashprokt, did not fulfill its promises, because of which Russia could not continue building a number of ships for the Russian Navy. Then we sorted it out after all. It cannot be said that Russia did not try to create high-capacity gas turbines on its own. The development of the GTD 110M gas turbine began back in the 1990s. It was developed just on the basis of reworking of the previously unsuccessful model of the GTD 110 engine of the Mykolaiv plant, Zaryamashpri. The new turbine was developed. It was even used at Ivanovskaya GRES and Ryazanskaya GRES in the late 2000s. However, the product turned out to have many childhood diseases. As a result, the turbine was never finalized. The project was abandoned, and it was decided to follow a simpler and faster way. In the 2000s, Russia started to buy large-capacity gas turbines abroad. They were massively installed at power plants under construction in Russia. Difficulties in creating large gas turbines lie in high technological requirements and complexity of engineering solutions. The development of such equipment requires in-depth knowledge of materials science, heat transfer, aerodynamics, and a precise production process. Experience in the aviation industry is certainly useful, but technology transfer between sectors takes time and effort. In the past, Russia may have chosen to buy foreign plants not only because of a lack of competence, but because of economic feasibility and accelerated deployment of new power generation capacity. Now, however, in the context of political and economic trials, priorities have changed. Today, the ability to independently produce key components for the energy infrastructure is becoming a matter of national security and economic sustainability. Russia comprehensively returned to creating its own high-capacity gas turbine after the scandal in Crimea, when Siemens announced a ban on the use of its units, and before that the issue was dealt with on a residual principle. However, it was not possible to create the turbine quickly. In 2017, it was damaged in tests and had to be finalized. Gas turbine units are a product of the highest engineering qualification, both in terms of project development and technical realization. The first GTE 110M unit in 2017 was destroyed during testing, and this is normal for such complex equipment. Similar accidents occur with prototype units in China, where the number of engineering personnel is incomparable to ours. The increase in the weight of rotating structures inevitably leads to a sharp risk of unbalance, which at such speeds simply tears the plant apart. Therefore, the appearance of a working series is a huge step forward because of the servant engineers of the country. As a result, the Rybinsk-based Saturn UDC was up to the task. Childhood diseases were cured, the turbine was finalized, it was successfully tested at Ivanovo CCPP, and serial production started. The domestic turbine has less weight and dimensions and higher fuel efficiency. It is planned to produce 2 turbines per year with increasing production and eventually replace all imported units with domestic ones. In parallel, another Russian company, Power Machines, is developing a high-capacity turbine. More than 150 engineers of the highest qualification are involved in the creation of GTS 170. It is necessary to create and produce 1,600 units of turbine equipment. These figures emphasize how complex and multidisciplinary this task is. Power Machines plans to produce 12 such turbines per year. Competition in this sector within the country is not a hindrance. Besides, it will be easier for the 2 manufacturers to cope with the expected demand for such turbines. There are about 310 gas turbine units in operation in Russia today. Each of them costs about 3 to 4 billion rubles. Accordingly, by 2035, foreigners could receive in Russia $1.5 to $3 billion only for the supply of equipment, excluding spare parts and the cost of installation and repair. However, now future orders will be received by domestic manufacturers and the money will remain in the country. Moreover, Russia will not have to buy such turbines from Iran, which was discussed in 2022. There is nothing surprising about the fact that Iran has long been able to produce large-capacity gas turbines. Unlike Russia, Iran did not create its own. It just managed to get Siemens to retain its license to produce such turbines despite sanctions by import substitution of materials and parts. Russia, on the other hand, created its own large-capacity turbine from scratch. Of course, there is no need to replace all gas turbines with domestic ones in the near future, because the average service life of a turbine at TPPs is 30 years with the possibility of extension. And often the Siemens or General Electric equipment in our tests was delivered in 2012 to 2017, i.e. it is considered quite new. However, there is a market for domestic turbines. According to the calculations of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs RSBB, by 2027, Russian generating companies will need 28 large-capacity gas turbines. Rostec estimates the market demand for 50 such units by 2035. However, if the development of the Far East and new regions intensifies, the need may increase by 25 to 30%. And in our opinion, in a year or two, Russia will enter the top league of the world turbine industry in terms of volume and quality, making a serious competition to foreign companies that have left the domestic market. And a couple more pieces of good news. The electronics industry in Russia is now experiencing a real heyday. You and I have already rejoiced many times at the opening of new production facilities in this industry. As for the total output, it grew almost 1.5 times last year. At the end of 2023, the volume of the market of contract manufacturing of electronics in Russia increased by 42%, up to 35 billion rubles, reported the news with reference to the research data of the Association of Russian Developers and Manufacturers of Electronics. It showed that the average utilization rate of enterprises reached 79%. The growth continues even now. In the first quarter of 2004, the market volume increased by 44% in comparison with the same period of the last year, and investments in production for the same time increased by 160%. Electronics contract manufacturing includes assembly and production of printed circuit boards, component installation, casting and mold making, and other operations. The largest market players in Russia are GS Group, ATB Electronics, NPP Gamma, and other companies. The basis of contract manufacturing is the assembly of components on printed circuit boards, but more than half of the cost is formed at the expense of related services, circuitry, design, testing, packaging, and other services. It is not the first time that active growth in contract electronics manufacturing in Russia has been noted. In 2019, this market increased by more than a quarter, to 20 billion rubles. At that time, these figures were achieved due to large import substitution projects. Today, the entire Russian electronics market, not only the consumer market, is estimated at 6,100 billion rubles. 65% of this is occupied by imported products, and 35% is left to domestic products. Russian contract manufacturing of electronics is growing due to the abandonment of production in Europe and Asia. Even without taking logistics into account, Asian production is sometimes more expensive than Russian production. This was noted by a representative of the domestic company Implata. JS Group's utilization of contract capacity, depending on the number of orders, today ranges from 80 to 100%. It is expected that for 2024, the growth of the Russian market of computing equipment will be 30%, telecommunications 50%, and components no more than 30%. By 2030, the Russian market of microelectronics in the optimistic scenario can grow 4 times, up to 1.1 trillion rubles, according to analysts of the auditing company KEP. Of this, 578 billion, i.e. 55%, will be provided by Russian manufacturers. There is one more piece of good news. Another high-point industry, the production of bearings, has begun to develop rapidly in Russia. Currently, the share of bearing imports exceeds 70%. The problem became most acute in 2022. Due to the shortage of components, some enterprises, including manufacturers of locomotives and railroad cars, actually stopped their operations. Difficulties with the repair of existing equipment arose. The lack of full localization caused several plants to shut down, leading to shortages in the domestic market. As a consequence, a number of measures were taken to remedy the situation. Some of the problems were solved quite promptly, but bearing dependence remains one of the main problems for the domestic industry. Another important step in this direction will be the creation of an industrial cluster for the production of bearings in the Rostov region, which was announced in April 2024. This cluster will include both local enterprises and companies from the Tver region and Moscow region. Andrei Savlyev, Minister of Industry and Energy of the region, noted that the launch of production on the new territory will begin this year. Today, technical documentation is being developed. The official emphasized that the creation of an interregional technopark will help to gradually get rid of dependence on imports. Roller and needle roller bearings for cars, as well as ball bearings for airplanes and electronics, will be produced here. It was also announced that by this summer, the task of full localization of production of cassette bearings for railway cars will be fulfilled. All key components of this product have been successfully substituted. For example, Techem Group has launched production of rollers. The company is also working on localization of bearings for locomotives and other rolling stock, including high-speed electric trains. At the end of the 23rd year, Automotive Bearing Plant No. 1, located in the Dubna Special Economic Zone, produced the first batch of parts, 1,000 pieces. From 2025, the enterprise plans to produce up to 380,000 pieces annually.